There's a pattern I always see in modern entertainment that's becoming harder to ignore the more that it keeps happening. A new game will drop, it'll get a strong reaction online, and then almost immediately, a completely different narrative starts to form online surrounding the game. Which is exactly what's happening with Pragmata, because while people are engaging with the game for what it is, there are certain corners of the internet that are still trying to turn this game into something else entirely. It's a lot, but first, we're gonna start with, Hassan Piker. Unfortunately, Hassan Piker is still relevant, I guess, to some degree. The guy is about as a shill as you can get, but either way. Recently, Hassan spoke on Pragmata, where he effectively attacked the entire gaming community around the game too. He outright claims that the people saying that Pragmata makes them want to start families is unrealistic and stupid, because gamers, in his opinion, do not engage with physical intimacy at all, apparently, which is kind of crazy to say. I'm gonna let Hassan explain himself, so please watch this clip.
In any case, what is this? Capcom's Pragmata. Wait, did it come out already? Pragmata, it's making thousands of people suddenly want to start a family. You play as Hugh, a soldier, stranded on a ruined lunar research station. His job is protecting the childlike android Diana while fighting rogue AI. It's out already? Is it good? Isn't this like Death Stranding? In one emotional moment, she gives him a crayon drawing of the two of them together as a little family. Even streamers who say at the start they didn't want kids end up breaking down happy in tears. So what's really interesting about this is all of these unfuckable losers in the gaming sphere always talk about like starting families and stuff. And I don't understand like why this has become a thing that they care about. Like if you're a gamer, you should care about things that you actually experience. You should care about things that you actually enjoy, right? If you're a fucking lonely gamer who has never been around a woman and will never have with a woman, why do you care? Like, why do you care about having children or like riding for having children? Like, if they changed hot Cheetos, if they changed the recipe of hot Cheetos, if they changed the recipe of like, I don't know, Dr. Pepper or something, and you freaked out about that, that makes sense, right? Like, that's precisely what your life is about. But as far as like LARPing about starting families and whatnot, this is something that I never understand. It just doesn't make any sense to me because it's just not something that you're going to experience ever for your life, for the rest of your life, right? Also, I will say, Japanese game, putting a child in there, you're playing with fire, okay? Don't get mad at me for saying this, but I feel like any Japanese game you put like a child, it's gonna invite maybe the worst possible fandom, you know? I know it's not like that. I'm sure the game is not like that, but there will be people who take it like that.
So as you just saw, Hassan just assumes, like some out-of-touch school teacher, that he knows exactly how everyone thinks while confirming he doesn't really know anything at all. Claiming that all people who play video games don't get laid is a crazy accusation because it's just not true for obvious reasons. But it's also an elitist proving that he believes that he can generalize an entire group of people based on a hobby and then reduce them to something that he views them as. Hassan is no stranger to having horrible takes. This is pretty common for this guy, let's be real. But claiming that this is just ridiculous. Like, you seriously looked at a game and immediately thought, well, everyone who plays video games are virgins, right? Like, that makes sense. Ironic considering that Hassan has taken money from companies like Ubisoft in the past to stream and promote games like Assassin's Creed Shadows, by the way. Which means by definition that he too then is a virgin himself because he plays games, which again, that would make no sense now, would it? But is it really any wonder why the crazy far leftist talking head has a bone to pick with a game like Pragmata? Because it enforces the belief system of people wanting to have kids and starting a family of their own? It's as if this guy shudders at the concept of people who don't like him having children of their own. But what's equally stupid, but actually more concerning, is how near the end of his rant there, Hassan claims that Diana, the little robot girl in the game, is somehow tied to that whole you know what adults really like children group. Again, it's YouTube, so I can't really say certain words, but you get the idea. But Hassan really saw a little innocent girl in a video game and his mind immediately went to, this is problematic, like you can't make that up. And the fact that he insinuates that it's a Japanese-made video game, so having little girls like this means what he thinks it is just also just insane to me. Because this is Hassan now not only attacking players, but an entire country of people and trying to distill them down to what his moronic belief system allows him to think and act like. Again, imagine going to Hassan as a moral arbiter for anything besides what not to be these days. Besides, his claims against Pragmata are not only just flat out wrong, but to claim the Japanese as a populace are somehow a horrible group of people because of Diana being a child in a video game that is actually a take you could say hinges on the corners of racism even. But Twitch won't do anything about Hassan anyways, cause they love him, so he's gonna get away with it. But again, this is a guy who clearly hates video games. But he's also happy to take companies' monies to promote them like he did with Shadows is disingenuous, but doesn't really begin to explain this guy's entire mantra. Then you have Nick Tech, that's a YouTuber who made a post about Pragmata on Twitter that got over 5 million views and caused people to lose their minds. It's this on screen here. So Nick Tech just said he thinks Pragmata is great, and if this game at all emulates what it's like to have a little daughter in real life, he thinks that it's a great game to play and support as well. People ended up getting, mad at him because, oh my god, he's pushing hope. He's trying to give the wage slaves a sliver of happiness in 2026, and, well, we can't have that now, can we? As one user replied, he called Nick Tech an effing weirdo and people shouldn't have admiration for a child character in a video game, which again is what I keep seeing time and again. These people who are really mad that a game is injecting some much needed hope in others' lives, which is a bad thing now, I guess. Interesting how Pragmata makes these people lose their minds, yet the same people were dead silent when Lee and Clementine from The Walking Dead, who were also close in age to Hugh and Deanna in Pragmata, had a very similar relationship as well in that game too. But it was totally fine if people loved Clementine and wanted to protect her, but with Diana, it's apparently a bad thing now. I am noticing the pattern here, and I'm thinking it's mostly because Diana is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl that a lot of these activist leftist types really don't like how people like Diana. But if she looked maybe more like Clementine or something, they would have zero problem with the game at all. Very interesting. Your bias is showing, by the way, you weirdos, but I see it anyways. Then you had Shoe on Head, another YouTuber who replied to Nick Tech, and she sweared a lot, so I had to blur it out, but here's what she said. By the way, she's a mom now, so this adds more weight to what she's saying. I cannot believe how mad people are at this tweet. Yes, this is what having a kid is like. It's also others not so fun stuff, of course, and lots of responsibility, but the good parts completely outweigh the bad and make it all worth it. People have been so blasted by anti-natalist propaganda, they lose their minds at anything remotely pro-children. I'm glad this cute video game is inspiring people to want kids. Yeah, had to censor some words there, but you got the idea. And I think she's right. That's really what the whole Pragmata discourse comes down to, really. You have a bunch of terminally online people who kind of just hate themselves that are continuing to try to tear this game down because it goes against the propaganda that has, let's be real, systematically warped their brains a long time ago already. What I do find interesting is how all the hate is directed solely at the father and daughter relationship that's in this game. There's zero mention of anyone who hates Pragmata speaking on its gameplay, or its world design, or even its mechanics, which tells me that the vast majority of people who hate Pragmata have never actually played the game. And the other far more concerning thing for me is that this game proves that the propaganda is clearly working, because these people are seeing a father and daughter relationship and their reaction is akin to seeing a sea of cockroaches at this point pretty much. They're kind of appalled by it, like it's some miscalculation, as if this can't exist. One user in that same comment section, as you can see here, brings up Silent Hill F and states that women need to know their worth and that they are not baby-making machines or they will end up like one of the monsters in Silent Hill F, which I have to censor in that image, but it's a giant female humanoid monster with multiple pregnant bellies. And actually, this user does make a point that I like, but not really the one they intended. It's kind of true actually how the same feminist activist crazy types who openly hate Pragmata completely love and adore a game like Silent Hill F, because that game doubles down and appeals to their beliefs that were placed there by propaganda since childhood. You see, Silent Hill F, in case you don't know, is a game where the main character and all of its themes are based around the idea of womanhood, feminism, and the concept of men not having agency over you. I think it's sold about 1 million copies so far or something like that. There was some sort of audience for the game at least, even though the combat was kind of just more akin to something like Dark Souls, which was kind of weird for a game called Silent Hill. But generally speaking, the same types who hated Pragmata for its pro-child message are suspiciously very silent, pun intended, when Silent Hill F came out, almost as if as long as something enforces their belief system, they will just leave it alone and actually protect it too. Very interesting how a game where anti-baby propaganda is championed, while the game where a father protects a daughter is met with such vitriol in response. Further expanding on that whole Silent Hill F comparison, if you don't mind, PC Gamer recently had an article about that game too, as you can see here, where the director of Silent Hill F said he's not qualified to tell you how women should feel, but instead relies on his female developers and neobards to tell him what that game needed instead. So in case you don't know, Silent Hill F tells the story of Hinako, who's a young girl who lives in 1960s Japan. The entire game is about Hinako struggling with where to go with her life as the world around her begins to give women more rights. The game also doesn't technically take place in Silent Hill like the other games, which a lot of people theorize this game was something else entirely, and that they simply slapped the name Silent Hill on it so that it would sell more copies, which I would totally see. Because again, if you look at the combat, it's nothing this series is known for, which is a dead giveaway. Anyways, the entire game is Hinako fighting different renditions of her deepest fears, which is a Silent Hill like thing if you haven't played those games before, but like I said again, that bloated pregnant monster, which according to the director at Silent Hill F, those monster designs like that were actually designed by women as well at the studio. And in case anyone believes the themes of the game are not blatant, the director confirmed via an interview here, the main theme is women's rights, or how that was perceived in that time. We have a lot of female members on our team, and you'd always ask them questions regarding the fears Hinako had and the monsters that represent them. The director then spoke on how he reached out to female devs and neobards when making the game to get feedback, and he continued, "Some of them are married, some of them have kids, some are right out of school. So you get different perspectives from different age ranges. I am not qualified to tell you how women should feel or what the pressures they face. I can try to understand, but that's not on me. The most I can do is talk to people and get feedback and try to translate that as much as possible." He continued, "So with the monster that represents Hinako's fear of pregnancy and whatnot, there was a lot of feedback from our team members, and it was drawn by one of our female concept artists too. So there's a lot of details. This is your own personal nightmares or the nightmares of people who've had children. And again, talking to our younger staff members, if they're afraid, what are they afraid of?" So the reason why I bring up Silent Hill F here is pretty simple. It was not targeted at all by the same types of people who were now trying to drag Pragmata down. Instead, Silent Hill F is seen as a great piece of art to these types because it reinforces their belief systems. Now, I'm not here to say that Silent Hill F is a bad game. It's not really for me either way anyways, especially since I saw some takes of it online, and I saw its whole story, and I'm fully convinced this was never a Silent Hill game to begin with. They just kind of slapped the name on last minute. But the game's blatant anti-male story is rampant throughout the game. That is true, and the ending especially, which I won't spoil. But let's just say it's kind of stupid. You also at one point get a demon arm. Remind me again how this is Silent Hill apparently. Look, I fully admit that Silent Hill maybe as a series is just not really for me. I played the Silent Hill 2 remake myself, and I thought a few of the monster designs were cool, but overall the game was fine, but I would never play it again because there's simply no variety to its gameplay systems whatsoever. That being said, it is very interesting how two very different and unique experiences on the concept of children and legacy can both be birthed out of Japan within a year or two with Pragmata and Silent Hill F, and they are kind of the epitome of games that are now being made on direct opposite sides of the same spectrum. Whereas Silent Hill F views the concept of having children and being a wife as being shackled down, jailed even, and that raising your children is akin to living in hell or something, Pragmata brings the opposite, which is hope and beauty. Personally, I think the propaganda that has damaged the psyches of young people in general does need to be healed. And I think this nihilistic viewpoint on the world does no one favors but those in control who want that as the outcome. I can't imagine living my life not having hope that the future can get better. Like, no matter what I see or read online, I continue to have hope. I don't think the idea of having children is somehow this horrific thing. Of course, people will say, well, you're a man. How would you know? Which is true to an extent. But this belief system also conveniently circumvents what men are expected to do when it comes to a situation with a child as well. Or really just providing in general. Like, as much as women want to cram the idea of you don't know how hard it is to be a woman into the heads of men around them, I equally do believe that women especially have no logical concept of how hard it is to be a man as well these days. Because to a woman, to exist is natural to them, right? They objectively will get noticed for simply just being them, for being there. They don't have to do much of anything to really attract a partner. A large majority of men, however, do not have that similar experience. However, when I worked in restaurants, especially there, I keenly remember looking at some of my male coworkers, but the men around me, unfortunately, like for example, right, some of them were shorter, and these men were treated by the women that we worked with as if they were like, I don't know, man, like lepers almost. The women, they just didn't see these men, whether they were shorter, maybe they were uglier, they didn't have the status or the money as even being someone someone they viewed as honestly a human being. These men were like, I don't even know how I would personify it really. It's as if they were like viewed by the female workers around us, as if these guys were an entirely different like subspecies or something, if that makes any sense. These women just didn't see the guys as their equals, right? They were always lesser to them for reasons that these men couldn't really change, if that makes sense. And I always sympathized when I saw this happen in real life, because to me, these men I worked with who were maybe shorter or maybe not as attractive as the guys these girls would usually go for, like you would see it in those guys' eyes. They would feel dehumanized, like they could die tomorrow and nothing would change, you know? That's what I've seen. And even me, I remember I had female coworkers who made the same money that I would make, and they would say openly how they would never date a guy who made what they would make. And the whole concept was always crazy to me. Like, imagine saying you can't see yourself with a guy who makes the same money as you do, so you then view a man who is at the same level objectively as you, but you see them as a loser, but you don't see yourself as a loser for being at the same level. You can see how bizarre that is, right? Again, I see this all the time when I worked in restaurants. Not even restaurants, really. Any job I had where women were there pretty much. And it was always fascinating to see, right? People working in a restaurant or whatever, it's like the closest you're going to come to like a second coming of living in high school pretty much. It's just groups of people who all believe they are better than others for really no reason, despite all making the same money. And it was like only once I actually left that environment did I really realize how messed up that environment really was. But that sort of mentality is also what reinforces and suffocates so many men in the world today. They are not seen as people at all, really. They are only as valuable as far as their wallets can take them. Like, the resources that they provide matter more than who they are as actual human beings. And I already know there's some women watching this maybe laughing, thinking that it's pathetic, but the men listening are probably nodding their heads saying, yup, and this is what I mean. So the discourse surrounding Pragmata and the comparison with Silent Hill F especially, it's very interesting how, like, no matter where you go really, where you live or what you do, the world itself and how people view each other, it's like the restaurants I worked in ultimately always everywhere. And seeing how people view a game that predominantly like gives men hope in like Pragmata, it's very interesting how the types who champion a concept like feminism or whatnot, they will instead view Pragmata and those who love that game in a similar way to how I saw women view the men that I worked with too. They see people who like Pragmata or its pro-family message almost as if they're enemies to their existence. Like them simply being is an affront to their entire life and how they live. And interesting as well, since moving on from restaurants, I've seen how some women I used to work with are living years later now, like completely removed from the whole experience. And they're still alone and they're still miserable, yet they'd rather die alone probably than give one of those guys I worked with a chance, which is honestly crazy to me. But it's still fascinating, right? How bizarrely out of touch everyone really is when you really look deeper into it. Look, I'm not saying all women are bad or all men are good, of course not. I've seen some, let's just say, pretty heinous acts from both genders, let me tell you. But what I can say is that we don't often have a discussion like this because we lack the appropriate insight to really see things for what they really are. Like, the world may be a nasty place to a degree. It's also full of cold-hearted individuals, but it doesn't mean that you need to lose hope still. And I think that anything that gives you hope, that makes you smile these days, is something worth defending or fighting for. For example, as seen here, one user hated Pragmata and said, "Weeb incel gamers LARPing saying, oh, I want to be dad now, because they're manipulative, creepy freaks and like the ooh-woo little girls with model face, especially the lolicons, obviously." The person who wrote this is so freakingly, like, they're so terminally online, dude. The devs know the male gamers hate a realistic or ugly child because that's not what they're playing for. Good lord, how some people type, dude. If you ever needed like a better example of someone who doesn't view the male demo as their equals, like, here you go, there's more proof. But on the flip side, right, you have the hopeful messages coming out from the game as well. You have David Szymanski, which I probably said his name wrong, but he's the guy who created Iron Lung, yeah, the game that the movie starring Markiplier is based on. So he also played Pragmata, and as you can see here, he said as a father of 3 that he's having the most wholesome time with Pragmata and loving every minute of it. And that is what I mean. Like, what you have there is a divide, and a terrible one at that. You have essentially one side that is for life and hope and the other that is nihilism and death. And the nihilistic side is really mad that the hopeful ones are having a blast with a game that they don't like. But that's the online machine, I guess, right? You're going to have those who playing it that are going to be praising it, while others like your Hassan Pikers or your, I guess, nihilistic femcells hating on the game because it goes against their god they worship of modern day feminism. But this is what happens. The discussion becomes more abstract, right? Less about if the game is fun and more about what does this all mean, as if the game itself is secondary in a conversation about it in the first place. And the problem there with Pragmata and Silent Hill F to a degree too is the conversation stops being about or judging these games on what they do, but instead what they represent. And this is why it just doesn't work, because it's a completely different standard, because the goal then isn't about evaluating the experience on its merits, but instead just how does this game fit as a single piece in an overall puzzle that is the narrative that I want to push, you know? And it spreads fast like these narratives do, but either way, I mean, Capcom is still winning like crazy. They've already had like 3 big wins this year: Resident Evil Requiem, Monster Hunter Stories 3, now you got Pragmata. So like no matter the genre, Capcom's still crushing it because they're focusing on the game and not the discourse. And while these people may try to tear this game down like Hassan, it's clearly not going to work, because the gap will only just widen for both great and terrible reasons, because it's not only going to change how games are going to be talked about, which is happening, but also how people engage and play these games as well. And we're going to likely see more situations like this in the future, where the conversations surrounding a game say one thing, while the people who played it will be saying something entirely different. Finally, Kotaku threw their hat in the ring, because of course they had to as well. As seen here, Kotaku wants everyone to be normal about Pragmata, but then proves in their own article why the only people being weird about this game come from a place of anti-children viewpoints instead. So early on in the Kotaku writer says how when they first played Pragmata in 2025, one of their colleagues' first impression of Diana was that she was, you know what bait. I can't say the word, it's YouTube, but you know what I mean. Anyways, these people are self-reporting on themselves, I guess, but because they kind of see a kid and immediately start thinking of the character in weird, lewd ways, which, let's be real, it's more of a self-report than anything, I gotta admit. But Kotaku also claims that the conversation around Pragmata being seen as you know what bait has placed the game at the center of the culture war. But the problem Kotaku, like always, fails to understand is who was pushing back against the game originally and why. Kotaku does try to claim that grifters, their words not mine, as you can see there where I highlighted, were the ones using the game first as some gotcha, when in reality it was the nihilistic anti-baby people who started the discourse by having a problem with Diana's design in the first place. Another tweet Kotaku uses is this one where a user says these players don't want kids, they want pets. Which, that is an insane self-report. Again, I don't know how you look at a child and think, wow, I want one as a pet. That is just, what? This is why people are so sick of the activism side of things. Like, look, okay, I beat Pragmata. I'm on the bonus mode right now. I'm almost done that too. Then I'm going to do my lunatic run, and not once did I stop while playing this game to think, wow, I want Diana to be my pet. That is not even like remotely something I considered at all while playing it. My only thought was this little girl wants to see the ocean, so I'm going to rip and tear like I'm the Doomslayer until it's done through this like army of robots like they're wet tissue paper so Diana can see the ocean. I never once thought anything these weirdos are pushing. Again, it all feels like self-reports to me. And it's ironic considering that Kotaku of all places asks us to be normal about Pragmata, and then proceeds to show examples of people who would agree with them but are also not being normal themselves. It's just a bizarre article all around. I think the only clear example given is this one by Kotaku where some Blue Sky user is just utterly confused by this other user basically saying that catering a dad simulator game to men is somehow a bad thing. This post by this Mary user goes on a tangent saying that men can't be nurturers, and if they see a child as anything but their lineage, it means they're a predator. And all I gotta say is, I think a lot more people grew up without fathers than I initially realized. Because these people's mentality around this whole game is proving to me in real time that not enough people were hugged as kids. And not enough of them were loved, and a lot of these people were raised by the propaganda they consumed for years without realizing it, which explains why they think this way. The activists, as you could say, they're out in full force. They have lost their minds. Kotaku was unsurprisingly alongside with them. Hassan also, like moths to a flame, these people, they just all have horrific takes all around. But I bet if you asked them what they thought of Silent Hill F, they would be clapping till their hands calloused over from the amount of virtue signaling they would be doing. But if you ask me in the end, we could just use more hope in our lives, and please remember, not everyone is an insane activist online. You're actually in fellow company here with me that yes, I think all of these people are crazy, delusional, and hateful, because that's all they can really feel, to be honest. Just don't give it to that same rage, okay, or the hopelessness as these people did. Like, we can be better than this, and you should be. So please take care of yourselves and go find something today that makes you happy. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to. These people, they do need help, man. It's just sad to see how blatantly brainwashed so many people are without realizing it, but oh well, I'll see you guys next time.